Hello friends! This video is for anyone who is interested in getting some Buddhist prayer beads, or you already have some, but maybe you don't know what they mean or how to use them. I have been a longtime student of Tibetan Buddhism. I'm a meditation instructor, and I want to help you use your prayer beads for some actual spiritual benefit. This video has two parts. So first of all, I'm going to give you some background as to what these beads are, what they mean, how they're used in traditional practice, and then I'm going to give you a second half on how you can use them if you don't have any background in Buddhism and you just want to use them maybe for some mindfulness or reminding yourself of what your spiritual goals and values are. In the info box below, you can find the time on this video when that second half starts, so if that's all you want, just go ahead and skip there. But if you want a little background, here it comes. So first of all, I'll use the terms prayer beads and mala interchangeably. Mala is Sanskrit, it just means like necklace or garland, and it refers to prayer beads. I have several different types that I'm going to use in this video, so I'll just be changing them out. So first of all, there's the long mala, and this traditionally has either 108 or 111 beads to it. If you're wondering why, 108 is a very auspicious number in Indian culture, and of course Buddhism comes from Indian culture, so that's part of the reason that they picked up this 108 number. You'll also find that number in Hinduism and other forms of Indian spiritual practice. So the long malas are used in rituals, they're used in practice, they're used to count basically 100 repetitions of a mantra. If you're not familiar with what a mantra is, I'll talk about it a little bit more in the second section of this video, but briefly, a mantra in traditional practice is usually in Sanskrit, and it's usually like the seed syllables of a deity or a Buddha. So when you say it, if you're saying like Om Mani Padme Hung, the mantra of the Buddha of compassion, you're evoking not just the Buddha of compassion, but also the capability for compassion within yourself. So these long malas would be used in the context of a ritual or a retreat, or any time that someone is really trying to immerse themselves in the energy of a particular spiritual quality or Buddha, like compassion, wisdom, protection, those kind of things. There's also a short mala or a wrist mala, and this can also have different numbers of beads. They could have 27, they could have 54, which is half of 108. Personally, I like 21 because there are some practices in Tibetan Buddhism where you would recite a given mantra 21 times. Like for instance, for those who are familiar with Vajrasattva, which is like a Buddha related to cleansing and purification, you would do the Vajrasattva mantra 21 times every day if you want to keep some continuity with that practice. There are also different materials that malas can be made from. So this one is made from sandalwood. I got it a long time ago, 2003, before I started doing the foundational practices of Tibetan Buddhism, which is one way that a lot of people would use a mala, because you're counting 100,000 of this and 100,000 of that, and it's just easy to have something in your hand where you can count. As I understand it, sandalwood is actually maybe not the most environmentally friendly material to make malas from, but there are also malas made from just simple forms of wood. You can get malas made from lotus seeds. Really, what I've found are the most common types of malas are actually made of glass or plastic. So these are some glass beads that one of my teachers gave me, and they're really special to me for that reason. And a lot of people in the West, for obvious reasons, enjoy wearing malas made from semi-precious stones or gemstones or different types of crystals, which are really beautiful. Again, this is a mala that my teachers gave me, and it is, I don't know what type of stone it is, but it's a gemstone. It's really beautiful. I would use this mala for doing practices, for instance, related to Amitabha, who's the Buddha of infinite light, and he is related to this color, so that's why I would use it for that purpose. There are also malas made out of bone. So this one, at least theoretically, is made of yak bone. And this type of material is more traditionally associated with doing protector practices. So if you're familiar with Tibetan Buddhism, you know there are these like wrathful looking Buddhas, and their whole purpose is to protect us and to kind of be a more like sudden and immediate form of compassion, kind of helping to kick open the doors of our mind and really clarify and help us get over obstacles like being stuck on a sense of ourselves that are really hard to get over on our own. So that's what this type of mala is traditionally used for. People also will wear them kind of decoratively, but if you see somebody using this type of mala specifically for a certain type of practice, it's usually for that. Now I want to shift over from a little bit of background about what malas are and how they're traditionally used into how you can use them if you're not really familiar with Buddhism or other forms of traditions that would use a mala, but you still want to get some like spiritual benefit out of them. I mentioned mantras above, and that's a really great starting place if you actually want to use your mala to kind of keep your mind on track spiritually. So the Sanskrit word mantra actually comes from two different words, manastraya, which means to like protect your mind. This is coming from one of my teachers who is a Sanskritist. I am not a Sanskritist, so my apologies if I'm saying that wrong. The basic idea of doing a practice in which you use a mantra is that by saying the syllables that are related to a given Buddha, you're evoking that energy or that capability in yourself, and you're also evoking that sort of external support of, for instance, the Buddha of compassion. So I mentioned this before, but the Buddha of compassion in Sanskrit is called Avalokiteshvara. And if you're doing that practice, you might use the mantra Om Mani Padme Hung. This is a very common mantra in Tibet. I've actually heard it called the national mantra of Tibet, which is awesome. I wish we had like a national mantra of like the US. I don't know what that would be. Compassion, wisdom, it might be business, honestly, at the moment. So if you want to use a traditional mantra with your mala, even if you're using just a little wrist mala, this, by the way, is a great way to have some beads with you so that if you find yourself becoming annoyed or you find that you're just like really stressed out, you can come back to this and just use it either for saying mantras or in a couple of other ways that I'll show you in a second, but it can be super, super helpful. It's just kind of easier to have on you than like a longer mantra. I find if I put these around my neck, they usually end up kind of pulling my little neck hairs back there, or you have to like take them off. And if you're wearing headphones or something, or you're in a meeting, it can be a little bit obvious. But with a wrist mala, it's easy to just slip it off your wrist, have it in your hand. Nobody even necessarily knows what you're doing if you have it under the table, and you can just kind of use it as a way of getting grounded in the middle of whatever is going on. So if you wanted to use Om Mani Padme Hung as your mantra to kind of remind you in a stressful situation, if you need some compassion for yourself, if you're encountering someone who's suffering and you want to cultivate compassion for them and not just run away from the situation, you can whip out your handy mala and just start saying Om Mani Padme Hung. This is related to compassion in the sense of tenderness, kindness, and caring toward all beings, ourselves included. If that doesn't work for you, if you prefer a more spiritual but not religious way of doing practice, I also have another mantra recommendation for you, but this one is in English. And I should just say, with Tibetan Buddhism and I think the older traditions that it grows out of as well, there's a sense that when you say a Sanskrit mantra, you're not just like saying words, because the syllables of the mantra are not necessarily words. The sound Om, for instance, is not a word. There's no translation for it. It's felt that when you say syllables of a mantra, you're actually evoking, bringing into being, resonating with the sacred energies of that Buddha or of that aspect of reality, if you want to think of it that way. So when we say the mantra of the Buddha of compassion, we're evoking all the compassion that's ever existed. If you want to think of it that way, you can think of it like that. And this form of using a mantra, as I mentioned in the first section, is related to this sense of manastraya, of protecting the mind from falling into thoughts of ourselves and other people as just ordinary, as annoying, as damaged or broken. The mantra helps us remember, oh yeah, we're all Buddhas. So traditionally, mantras would be said in Sanskrit, even if you're a Tibetan practitioner and you're saying the rest of your practice in Tibetan. But it can be really helpful to have a mantra in your own language. So I want to offer you the mantra that I have used most often in English, and it's kind of inspired by the work of Brené Brown, who writes about, in her wonderful book, The Gift of Imperfection, and a lot of her other work, she writes about this sense that we have of just not being enough. Like we're never quite measuring up to our internal standards or what we think of as other people's standards for us. So this not enough quality can really keep us from being able to connect with other people or to recognize our own potential as beings. So I like to use the mantra, so to speak, already enough. When I find that I'm getting stressed out, or I have so much on my plate, or I just need to take a little breath and remember that from a Buddhist perspective, I have Buddha nature. I have a sacred aspect of my reality myself. Everybody else does too. You have a sacred aspect of your being. And our job with spiritual practice, again, from a Tibetan Buddhist point of view, is really to keep coming back to that aspect of ourselves that is sacred. So when I say already enough, for me, it's a way of reminding myself there's more to me than the hustle and the bustle. If there's someone who's annoying me out in the world, there's more to them than their annoying qualities. So the way you might use, again, a little wrist mala or any type of mala with this practice of saying already enough is you might use on the in-breath, just count one bead and think already, and on the out-breath, you think enough and count another bead. So you can use it like that. You can also just, for each bead, count already enough, and find the rate, find the rhythm, the speed that works for you. But just you're almost using the mala as like an external prop to remind yourself that this is what you're cultivating. So there's no need to really count these, just try them, see what happens if you do it for a longer time, see what happens if you only just do it for 3 or 4 breaths. It can make a really big difference if you're taking those little breaks in the middle of your day. I just mentioned coordinating your mala and your mantra with your breath, counting maybe one mantra for each breath, or faster if that works well for you. The other thing you can do is just use the beads to count your breaths. And I should say, a lot of folks start out with counting breaths, and it's a great way to keep your mind on the object of the breath. The count is really not the point. And a mala is a great way to work with the breath because you're not counting. I find that for me, if I start with counting the breath, it can actually be hard to stop. Like my brain just will go on autopilot and count those breaths anyway. So here, you're not really using numbers, you're just using beads. So with every breath, you move a bead. Or if you need a little bit more structure, your mind is going everywhere, then with your in-breath, you count one bead, with your out-breath, you count another bead, and it just gives you a little bit more to do and is likely to help keep your mind on the object of the breath. And the final way that I want to share using a mala is one that I have done. I've never heard a teaching on this, but I found it really helpful. So I want to just share, if you are somebody who fidgets, or you have, I have this really bad habit of pulling off skin from my fingers. It's really annoying. So if I find that I'm doing that, instead of just engaging in those little physical tics, so to speak, you can pick up a mala and just use the physical contact with the mala to kind of release that energy of wanting to pick or pull at yourself, or just fidget, spin something, flip a pen through your fingers, all that stuff that can be really annoying to yourself and others. Ta-da! You can use the beads of your mala as sort of like miniature worry stones, whether it's a stone or plastic or glass or wood, doesn't really matter the material. You can use that to kind of get that physical stimulus of doing something with your fingers or your hands, but you're not actually doing something that's super annoying. So there you go. There's a little bit of background on what malas are and how they've traditionally been used, and there are a few ideas to get you started using yours for spiritual growth or just remembering that you're a spiritual being and you have these aspirations to live into compassion and presence and wisdom and all these things. I hope that is helpful. I hope it helps you get more use out of a beautiful object. And I would love to hear in the comments how you use yours. If you have other ideas that I haven't mentioned, please drop them below. And happy mala using, friends.